So, last week, me and my friend went camping together for the first time, and something weird happened. When we got to the site, there was one other person there. A young woman named Joey. She introduced herself and said she knew the woods like the back of her hand and offered to show us around. We accepted, and off we went. She showed us the trails, the best views, and generally she was very sweet. She even joined us at our fire one night and talked to us about how she grew up camping with her dad. Around 12, she left, and we went to bed. When we woke up, I mentioned how nice Joey had been to my friend, but she had no idea who I was talking about. According to her, we were the only ones there, and we had all found our campsite by ourselves. And, not only that, we had gone to bed much earlier than I thought we did. Over the next few days, I would keep mentioning it to my friend, but she was adamant that there was no Joey, never. We left after 4 days, and have talked about it since, but she still doesn't remember Joey, despite me having a very clear memory of that whole day. I even checked the pictures I took, and she was right, no Joey, not even someone who looked like her. I still don't know what happened out there. Growing up, I always wanted to go on bike rides at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't until I was 13 that my mom finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, take a flashlight, and she set parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me. So right after sunset, I was off. I loved it. There was no people out walking their dogs, no kids running around. The temperature was perfect. It was really fun. So fun that I ignored the limits my mom set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between 2 neighborhoods. One where there's this long path that went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down this hill, having an absolute blast, and darted right through the parameters. My mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically the place where the path I was on led to, was barren. After 15 minutes of riding along this dirt path, I started to hear singing. I stopped riding to hear it better. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, but she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know how when you have phlegm in your throat, your voice gets scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inch forward and try to see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of her hair bouncing up and down like she was headbanging or something. I decided to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking maybe this person's in need of help. Or maybe this is just some insane person and the light will scare them away. So I take the flashlight out of my pocket, point it at her, and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized, bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too, but I conjured up as much bravery as I could and said, Sorry, in a very, oops, this is the wrong room kind of way. She didn't respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screams. She screams in an awful, awful high-pitched voice. My heart pounded, and I threw myself back onto my bike. I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can, and I don't look behind me. I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. So, I take my dad's ashes up to Glacier National Park every year. I lived in Colorado when this story happened, and I was headed down south through Idaho after I had visited Montana. My car broke down in Salmon, Idaho, and a nice man helped me out. I was headed through the mountains to Boise to visit a friend. It was about a 5-hour drive before I entered the truly mountainous section of Idaho. I saw a hot spring on the side of a 2-lane highway along Salmon River and decided to take a dip after the stress of having my car break down. The hot spring had a bathhouse up at the top near the road and a wheelchair ramp that went down to the area near the springs. People had created little bath-shaped sections in the river that were separated by river stones. Actually, you could sit in the spot that was shaped like a hot tub so that it held the water from the hot springs while the river rushed over it. I got out of my car and headed down to the hot spring, taking my dog with me. It was twilight, and about every half hour a car passed by. Knowing that I was essentially alone, I took my top off. I was sitting in the hot spring and actually took a photo of a car that was approaching. The car pulled up next to mine in front of the bathhouse. It was a truck with 3 men in it. Seamlessly, 1 man got out of the driver's side and 2 men got out of the passenger side. They moved without qualms and were covered in heavy black gear. They looked like hunters. I couldn't see the expression on their faces. The driver headed down the wheelchair ramp towards me, not hesitating. He took big, long strides. I recognized that there was danger here. The 2 passengers from the other side of the car headed down the steep bank along the wheelchair ramp, taking a shortcut. I was stuck in between both parties. I hid and dressed myself underwater while my dog growled. I've only ever heard him growl twice in my life, and this was the second time. The driver kept walking towards me, and he walked out onto the rocks and into the river, even though he was covered in heavy gear, and he could have waterlogged himself if he had fallen. The other 2 passengers from the other side of the car were also walking out onto the rocks directly in front of me. The driver got so close that I had to grab my dog before he lashed out at the driver. I was freaking out. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and my clothes, and I dragged my dog in between the 2 parties, my heart in my ears. The driver didn't stop, and he turned around very quickly, making an arc, coming at me still. The passengers were walking towards me as well, and I was trapped in between them. I ran up the bank, dragging my dog pretty much by his collar at this point, all the way to the car. The only way that I could get to my car without them grabbing me was by tossing my dog into the back and lunging myself into the passenger side of the car. I threw my keys into the ignition and turned them right when the men were walking up. Before anything else, or before I saw their face, I ended up throwing myself into the driver's seat and reversing my car I drove about 20 minutes down the road. I crossed the river on a bridge and hid my car behind a bank near other campers. That's where I sat and waited. Another 10 minutes passed by, and lo and behold, the truck drove by. The hunters were clearly looking for me, and I managed to wait about another half hour just to make sure they were definitely gone before driving up to the mountains, over to Boise, and into safety. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the stories today, feel free to hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing. If you really liked what you heard, I have a few other videos posted on the channel. Feel free to check them out. Alright, hope you have a good night. Bye.